For 15 years, he worked the night shift at Murphy's Diner, chopping vegetables in complete silence. The waitresses called him Ghost because he never spoke, customers never saw him, and he moved through the kitchen like he wasn't there. But when armed robbers burst through the back door at 2 a.m., everyone watched in shock, as the quiet cook's knife work wasn't just fast, it was lethal. And suddenly, his silence made perfect sense. Welcome to One Human One Story. Before we continue with this powerful story of hidden skills and unexpected heroism, have you ever encountered someone who worked silently but actually had extraordinary abilities? Let us know in the comments. And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button and help us honor those who were never meant to be forgotten. Murphy's Diner was an old truck stop on Interstate 40. Open 24 hours, neon signs, half burned out, worn floors, but delicious food. Especially their vegetable omelets and fresh-cut French fries were famous. People would come here eat and never ask who prepared those meals so perfectly. Eddie Martinez worked the night shift. Every night he came at 10 p.m. and left at 6 a.m. The same routine for 15 years. He had never been late, never left early, and he had never spoken a single word. The waitresses had given him various names over the years. At first they called him the Silent Man. Then he became Shadow. But finally Ghost stuck because he really was like a ghost. He made no sound moving through the kitchen. His footsteps were inaudible. He didn't speak. He just did his job. Eddie's job was preparing vegetables. Onions, carrots, potatoes, tomatoes, peppers, lettuce. Every night, truckloads of vegetables arrived, and Eddie would chop them. But his chopping style was beyond ordinary. His knife moved like an extension of his hand. Every movement precise, every cut perfect, every slice the same thickness. New waitresses would try to talk to him at first. "Hello, Eddie, how are you?" Silence. "Nice night, isn't it?" Silence. "Will you leave early this morning?" Silence. After a while, they would give up. Eddie didn't talk. Period. Owner Frank Murphy had also gotten used to Eddie's silence. "He works very well," he would say. "He never causes problems. He does his job perfectly. Why does he need to talk?" Customers never saw Eddie. The kitchen door was closed and Eddie never came out. He even spent his breaks in the back of the kitchen. It was as if the outside world didn't exist for him. But nobody knew who Eddie really was. Eddie Martinez had once lived under a different name. Corporal Eduardo Martinez, U.S. Army 75th Ranger Regiment, a war veteran who had served 3 tours in Afghanistan, participated in dozens of operations, and saved his comrades' lives. And yes, Eddie was so good with knives because he hadn't used knives only for chopping vegetables. Eddie's specialty in the Army had been field medic, treating wounded soldiers on the battlefield. And this job often required a knife, removing bullets, cleaning wounds, even performing improvised surgery. Eddie's hands had been life-saving hands for 10 years, until that last operation. 2009, Kandahar province. Eddie's unit had been ambushed by Taliban militants. During the 3-hour firefight, Eddie had tried to treat 6 wounded comrades, but he couldn't save the 7th. A young soldier, Tommy Richardson, had died in Eddie's arms. Eddie had stopped talking after that day. PTSD, survivor's guilt, social anxiety. Doctors had given him various diagnoses, but Eddie never wanted treatment. He only wanted silence, and Murphy's Diner had given him that. November 16, 2024, Saturday night, 1:45 a.m. Murphy's Diner was quiet as usual. One table of customers, Joe the trucker who came the same night every week. Waitress Mary was on shift, drinking tea by the register. Eddie was in the kitchen chopping vegetables as always. Eddie was especially concentrated that night. Tomorrow was Thanksgiving and he needed to prepare. He had 10 kilos of carrots, 10 kilos of onions, and 5 kilos of celery. He needed to julienne cut all of them. His knife was moving very fast. Chop, 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 chop. Perfect rhythm fluid movement. Eddie's eyes were focused on the knife, but his ears were always alert to surrounding sounds. Old habit. At 2:03 a.m., Eddie stopped. Something was wrong. He had heard a car outside, but the engine wasn't running. Just tire sounds, and very slow, as if nobody wanted to hear. Eddie put down his knife. He listened. 2 car doors closed quietly. Footsteps, but not normal walking. Stealthy steps. Eddie's pulse quickened. His body was alarming. Old reflex. 2 minutes later, the back door opened quietly. Eddie's posture changed. He was no longer a cook. He was a ranger. 2 men entered, masks on their heads, guns in their hands. The first was big. The second was scrawny. They looked amateur, but they were armed. "Don't make a sound," the big one said to Mary. "Open the register." Mary started trembling. "Please don't hurt us. We will give you money. Be quick." Eddie was watching from the kitchen. His position was perfect. The robbers couldn't see him, but he could see everything. 2 armed robbers. They hadn't checked the front door, only entered through the back. Unplanned, nervous, dangerous because they were amateur. Mary was trying to open the register, but her hands were shaking. "The password. I don't remember the password," she said, crying. "Remember, it shouted, the big one." He pointed his gun at Mary's head. Eddie made his decision. There were 3 knives on the kitchen counter. 8-inch chef's knife, 4-inch paring knife, and 6-inch utility knife. Eddie took the chef's knife, the one he knew best. He silently moved behind the robbers. The first was still threatening Mary. The second was watching the door, but watching the wrong direction. Eddie hadn't practiced combat arts for 15 years, but the body doesn't forget. He approached the second robber, without sound, right behind him. One movement, fast, silent, precise. The utility knife pierced the scrawny robber's wrist, while his other hand closed his throat. The man dropped his gun, couldn't breathe, lost consciousness. 3 seconds. The big one turned. What the hell? Eddie threw the chef's knife. The knife pierced the big robber's shoulder as Eddie lunged forward. He tried to grab the robber's gun. The fight began. The big man was strong, but Eddie was trained. He twisted the robber's wrist, made him drop the gun, locked his arm behind his back. "Get down," said Eddie. His first words. The robber resisted. Eddie pressed a pressure point. The man screamed in pain and fell to the ground. In 2 minutes, everything was over. Mary was watching in shock. Joe the trucker was watching with his mouth open. Eddie tied up both robbers with zip ties. Nobody asked where he found them. They called the police. They called the ambulance. The crime scene investigation team came. Detective Sarah Collins wanted to talk to Eddie. "What was your previous profession, Mr. Martinez?" Eddie hesitated. "Soldier." "Medic." "What unit?" 75th Rangers. Detective Collins raised her eyebrows. "Rangers. I see. When were you discharged?" 2010. "And you've been working here since then?" "Yes." "Why didn't you ever speak?" Eddie thought for a long time. "I had nothing to say." Detective Collins smiled. "Seems like you do now." The following days changed Eddie's life. His story made local news. It was told as a heroism story. But Eddie didn't want this. Mary approached him. "Eddie, you saved my life." Eddie nodded. "My job. Why didn't you ever say? Why didn't you ever talk?" There was nothing to say. But there is now, Eddie thought. Maybe there was. Owner Frank Murphy called Eddie to his office. "Eddie, you know this diner became famous because of you. Media is coming, customers will increase." Eddie felt uncomfortable. "I want old life." "But Eddie, people want to know your story. Story is over." Frank understood. "Okay. But at least sometimes talk. People want to talk to you." Eddie nodded. Maybe he could try. Months later, Eddie slowly began to speak. Not with customers, only with the team. Short sentences, necessary things. One day, a young waitress asked Eddie, "Eddie, why did you become a cook?" Eddie thought, "Because cooking is also healing." "I don't understand." "Feeding people, healing them. Different way, but same thing." The young waitress understood. Eddie's hands still worked with the same precision. But now, not only to save lives, but to give life. Every vegetable he chopped, every meal he prepared gave people strength. And sometimes, working alone on the night shift, Eddie would remember his old friend Tommy, and he no longer felt guilt. Because Tommy's death wasn't Eddie's fault, and now Eddie continued to save lives in a different way. Today, Eddie continues to work at Murphy's Diner. He talks now, smiles, even jokes sometimes. But most importantly, he has forgiven himself. He still uses his knives with the same precision, but now they are just tools, tools of love and healing. Because real strength is not the power to bury your past, but to transform it. And sometimes the greatest heroism happens not on the battlefield, but in daily life. I ask you, have you ever encountered someone who worked silently, but actually had extraordinary abilities? Did their story surprise you? Share in the comments. Because here at One Human, One Story, we believe that every person has a powerful story inside. And sometimes the greatest skills are hidden in the most humble jobs. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, subscribe and help us spread the stories of silent heroes. We will see you in the next story. And until then, remember, sometimes the greatest strength is hidden in silence.